Okay, so welcome to the next class. This class will be about bigotry. Well, I say bigotry, but more looking at almost the dangers of tolerance, and then transitioning to acceptance. And obviously, this is in conjunction with the LGBT community. So if we look at the next slide. The dangers of tolerance. There is a danger of tolerating others. We can let it blind us and allow the growth of hateful, sexist, homophobic, racist comments, jokes, and actions to grow in our workplaces, our friendship groups, and so on. The big problem is being tolerant of others is that if you work with people and they say comments that you don't agree with, but if they are well liked in your workplace or your group, I've heard people make excuses. I've seen people act really horrible, and then people go, "Oh well, this is what they're like," and almost make excuses for that. And if you genuinely tolerate that kind of behavior, like probably the biggest one I could use an example of is when I basically had to put a complaint in against a colleague in my last job when I changed my name because they started making jokes that went too far and turned into homophobic comments. And it probably would have been tolerated because other people thought it was funny, and no one else. Even when I complained and said, "No, you can't say that," no one else, went up to me and asked how I felt, or or even told him that you can say it. They were just laughing about it, and so, that as philosopher Karl Popper says, we can't be tolerant. We can have tolerance, but defending tolerance requires us to not tolerate the intolerant. So, people who think that homophobia is okay, think that making jokes about people's gender, sexuality, race, religion, stuff like that, comments, and it can be hard because, while you shouldn't throw yourself into every situation, if you feel like you can, speak to someone or affect or make a change of what's happening around you, then that's something that you should look to do. But if you hear something and you're not sure if that sounds correct, then a big important step is obviously educating yourself on these matters. If we look at the next slide, I suppose this is basically where the darker side of letting hate grow, or even allowing intolerance to fester and get to the point where it is engagement to other people's lives. Because the photo I've supplied is from a band called Rise Against. The song's called Make It Stop. It is about children who face homophobic comments and are not accepted in the community. To the point where they bully them, they tease them, they call them offensive languages, and essentially, these kids get to the point where they want to kill themselves because they don't feel accepted by the communities around them, and they feel like no one will want to help them. Not even your guidance teachers or people who should be there to support you. And in the song, there's a list of people who, young people, who basically are gay, who've killed themselves. It's a very saddening thought that a lot of people go through this. I mean, this song is basically based in America, So even in leading countries like the UK and US, where I say leading because, you know, some countries like Russia, you could be put in jail if you're gay. You know, we can be gay over here, but it's still not accepted or in all parts of the UK. And some people may tolerate it, but tolerating it is not the same as being accepting, because you're not really, you know, showing them a positive, you're not really being that positive individual, you know, which is an important role as a Jedi, because something we should strive. We should try and make the world, you know, the world around us a better place. Now, if we look at the next slide, you know, I'm going to talk about the idea of attachment. So the biggest thing that we can do as a personal impact is we can, you know, we often have our own friendship groups. You know, you have your bubble, if that makes sense, of you have your own little bubbles that you personally affect. Now, no matter how good your mate is, or how sound he is, or how lovely they are, you have to almost overcome that attachment. Like, don't let your attachment of friendship blind you to their behavior. You know, don't lie to yourself or cover up. Yeah, overcoming your attachments is not about getting rid of all your possessions or even denouncing your family. Instead, this is about moving forward. In overcoming your attachments, you are acknowledging what value these things have to you, and you recognize there comes a time where you should no longer fight for your attachments. You must let go. For Jedi, overcoming attachments can extend to bad habits, unhealthy perceptions, and connections to people that make us less who we've chosen to be. Now, this is the quote from the Jedi Compass. So, you know, essentially, it is part of us. You know, we shouldn't accept people who are hateful, intolerant, sexist, homophobic, you know. And if you lie to yourself, you know, you're not choosing to live, you know, the path you want to live. You're essentially, you could potentially make your life worse. So we should look to become accepting, because tolerance is okay, but acceptance is a goal for making society a better place, a more accepting place. And you also learn to what you do accept and what you don't accept, rather than just tolerate someone. You know, you have everyone has a choice in life to make. Next slide. Next slide.
Well, actually, just before we move on to the next one, because this was the natural end of this particular section for you, I want to point out, you know, you are talking about the line in which tolerance shouldn't be accepted. And I just want to pull people's attention back to the fact that in the Jedi Compass, it does say tolerance is not about agreement. It's about showing respect for the freedom of a person's choices and to respect their choices until, bunch of lines underneath that until, it reaches a point in which a reasonable person would consider the individual's actions as an emotionally, spiritually, financially, and or physically abusive threat to you or another. And what we've been talking about in here is that portion where tolerance becomes, we don't have to tolerate it anymore. And you know, when you were going through the Jedi navigation system, the paradox of tolerance was something that Keith or Satunis was actually the one who put that in there. And it was a good one. And I like how you actually tied this line in here to how we discuss things with the LGBT community, and also how we discuss things about the people that we have in our lives who are not overcoming their attachments, which, you know, I'm glad that you quoted the whole thing, because the attachments does say, you know, it's overcoming unhealthy obsessions, connections with people that make us less, and overcoming bad habits. And these are also beliefs that we have, and belief should be in here, but it's not. It's just kind of assumed that it's part of that. Unhealthy obsessions would kind of be in that belief section, but these are beliefs that we have to learn to change inside of ourselves and do some deep reflection on how we're impacting people around us by just having the beliefs, even if we don't express them to other people. Do you or Keith have any thoughts on that?
Well, our behaviors emerge from what we believe. So it's very hard to maintain beliefs and not act on them in some level. And that is a big problem when people make insensitive and inappropriate jokes, is because it's very reflective of their beliefs. And those beliefs can emerge from choice as much as ignorance. They could just not understand its inappropriate behavior because they've never understood it or had it challenged as inappropriate behavior. So, for example, a lot of sexist remarks that are sometimes made by older gentlemen to younger women in the workplace. You know, stuff like, "Oh, you sound like you should work on a sex hotline." Well, that's completely inappropriate. It's not a compliment or something you should say to a young woman, especially if you're her boss or manager. But
Yeah.
people do it because it's a generational thing, and they come from a generation where no one would challenge them on that. And that is the big problem, is that people often have values or virtues that they've never reflected upon or challenged themselves. And the problem with incompetence and ignorance is that a person will not recognize they are incompetent or ignorant until something makes them aware of it. And a person can be incompetent at being a good person. You can be incompetent at doing the right thing, especially if you've never been taught or understand what the right thing to do is in a situation.
The road to hell is paved in good intentions.
Yes, so that is part of why we must be intolerant of intolerance. But again, it's why we should also try and practice patience and not necessarily see people as the enemy, but see them as people who just need an education and to be helped. So I think something I would add to tolerance and acceptance is the premises of positive regard. No matter how horrible a person's beliefs may be or their incidental behavior that evolves from their belief, they're still a human being. And we can at least try, in our challenging of them, try and help them become a better person. Because they could just be ignorant and not understand, but you can't help them become a better person until you challenge them. And in the same way, you can't protect innocent people from their actions and their words unless you challenge them. So, and someone who makes the choice to do the wrong thing has to accept the consequences of that behavior. So in protecting innocent people, you have to challenge the person doing the wrong thing, but you can still at least try and view it as an attempt to help them as well become a better person. So
Sorry, I went to the next one.
yeah.
I was about to say, I agree with your statement. Interestingly enough, I agree with those statements. I definitely think it is definitely hard, you know, when you're trying to explain something new to a colleague, because sometimes some people I've worked with really don't understand how it makes you feel. And sometimes if you just explain to them, they take it really well. And again, I've now worked with someone who asks me questions constantly, and it's great because they're trying to learn. I think it's the attitude you choose to take when you deal with this, because while I know a lot of people don't like being told what to do or if they're doing something wrong, but if I'll say show a bit of humility. If you get something wrong, you're like, yep, no, I got it wrong, I apologize. what would you or what can I do better, or even have taking some time yourself to learn about it makes it generally better. I think if you have a bad attitude to learning something new or being told, well, I don't like that, then you need to really start questioning yourself a bit more. Cool. You guys have any questions so far?
No, I think, to be fair, and this is a compliment, as is that you've explained it very well. I think you've made your points very well. It's very hard to find anything to query in the broad premises and principles. I liked views of Karl Popper, his statement, because that's a well-known one. It's not truly a paradox if one's being a pedant, but it is known as the paradox of tolerance. So no, that's a good one. Yeah, no, very good. Enjoyed it. Brief and to the point, which is good. Always good to be brief and to the point. Because then if you wanted to do it as an hour-long session or something, and again, leaving plenty of time for debate and discussion. Yeah, no, really enjoyed it. Good
So now we're
slides.
going to the next section on acceptance.
Yep. Okay, so now this part obviously talks about the acceptance. And I know in the last session I had, obviously the people there asked the questions about how can you be accepting and stuff like this. So hopefully if you do rewatch these, then hopefully this answers some of your questions. So if we go to the next slide. That one. Yep. Okay, so the basic standard definition of acceptance is the ability to see that others have a right to be their own unique persons. That means having a right to their own feelings, thoughts, and opinions. You let them feel the way they want to feel. You let them be different and think differently from you. Again, we're talking about pretty much. We're talking about the idea of you accept them if they have a different name, maybe a unique name, or if they are non-binary, if they have, if they like identify as something, pansexual, gay, bisexual, lesbian, or maybe they could be polyamorous. You could be a Christian, you could be Jewish, you could be Sikh, you could be Muslim, you could be a pagan, you could be a Hindu, you could be a Jedi. There's so much that basically there is so much possibilities of what you could believe in, the way you want to live your life. And it's generally things, ironically, even though race, religion, sexuality, stuff like that is, it's protected under the Equality Act, it is still, it's still not always accepted. It's not accepted in mainstream society. I think we've become a lot better in recent years, but I do know there's still a lot of countries that still just don't accept LGBT individuals. If we go into the next slide, I'm going to walk through basically ways of how we can be accepting of the community. All right, so make sure the LGBT people are visibly welcomed. So, you can have signs up, saying this is a safe space, having signs up saying we don't tolerate abuse, homophobia, stuff like that. You can create a policy in your workplace that basically says that we'll, a lot of workplaces have this now, have the idea of, we're a diverse company, we accept everyone, stuff like that. I think even then, it's having things like, it's like having things like more inclusive language. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, more inclusive language. Like, so if you make an announcement, you can say, ladies, gentlemen, folks, stuff like that. I know NBs is a word that gets used for non-binary individuals, stuff like that. If you're sending an email, if you're talking to people, every time you meet someone who is part of the community, speak to them, kind of understand what their own personal preferences is, because everyone is different. Avoid assuming someone's gender, sexuality, religion, stuff like that. Because again, a big thing at the moment, especially with transgender people and non-binary individuals, is that it's it has no face. Anyone can be non-binary. It's becoming a more kind of way of life. So when you meet someone for the first time, speak to them, but don't jump straight into it, if that makes sense. Only ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but wait till it's an appropriate time to speak to your colleague, especially if they're new or you're introducing each other for the first time. Stuff like that. Ensure that staff have LGBT awareness training. If you're a boss or manager, or even if you can affect it in a minor way, just make sure that the people you're around have a good idea, or even a brief idea. Now that's whether giving them a talk or a presentation, or even do a little online 20-minute course, stuff like that. Again, as I said already, about the idea of policies, engaging with your staff members, your friends, making sure everyone's comfortable. And if you hear something, you're like, "Are you okay? Does that offend you?" Stuff like that. Can I, are you comfortable with me using this language? Just speak to people. Speak to the people they want to be spoken to. Just generally show them positive warmth, regard. Because you can make a massive difference to their lives. I mean, the big thing is especially in the LGBT communities, is that not everyone is openly gay, and not everyone can openly be gay. I come from a town where I know people have been kicked out of their own home because they're gay. So that's a big thing, is don't out someone's sexuality, or if they are part of the community, speak to them and understand. But if they are, but they also still have the right to privacy. So again, this is pretty much the idea of kind of make sure if you're asking something be appropriate about it. Make sure it's a safe environment you're in, stuff like that. Even check out some local LGBT communities, charities, stuff like that. A lot of cities will throw pride events, so that one time a year where you can easily get a hold of. I mean, we have Pride Month in the UK. At the moment, it's happening just now in June. So that's one of the best times to start learning about this stuff. There's so much books out there, so much media that can easily help give you the education that you'll need, to almost the tools to help navigate and become more accepting and more welcoming because it's not something that you can just do, but it's more something that you learn. Again, make sure that your procedures are in place. Procedures, make sure. But basically, with that one, just generally make sure that people aren't using bigoted language. And if you don't know if it's bigoted or not, but you see someone, looking a bit upset or not looking happy with that comment, speak to them, pull them aside. Are you okay? Stuff like that. Or even like, the thing is, when you start doing your own education with these things, or you watch a couple of videos on, say, YouTube, then it starts giving you a better idea of when to tell someone that you can't say that. Again, just keep up to date with these issues. What's good practice, what not to do, what not to ask. Again, don't bombard if you do have gay friends, don't bombard them with all 50 questions. While they may be happy to answer your questions, don't be like, go straight to them. Do your own research, because it doesn't take long to just give yourself that knowledge, which again, it's part of the Jedi way of life. There is no ignorance, there's knowledge. And while we won't be knowledgeable about everything, we have to accept that there'll be times where we're wrong, and even we can mess up. Just generally try your best. Be accepting, be nice, be positive, and just be inclusive. And we look at the next slide. Okay, so on the next slide, I've basically put some LGBT flags there. LGBT, transgenderfied, bisexual, lesbian, pansexual. Even look at these.
These are not all the flags either, are they?
Oh, there's a lot more, I think.
Yeah, because I know that there's at least one that's missing.
I definitely know, like, these are like I don't want to say the main flags, because that sounds really bad. But if you know these flags, you're doing good. But no, why is acceptance important? Dr. Caitlin Ryan, the director of Family Acceptance Project at San Francisco State University, has conducted some of the first studies on how a family's acceptance and rejection behavior affected the well-being of LGBT children. Her research shows how families can learn to support these children, even if they believe that being gay or transgender is wrong. One of Dr. Ryan's studies showed, which I just want to say it's not wrong, but one of Dr. Ryan's studies showed that family accepting or rejecting behavior towards a young person's LGBT status has significant implications for that child's health and well-being. Young people with high levels of family rejection were 8 times more likely to report having heavy attempted suicide, nearly 6 or more times likely. 6 or more likely to report high levels of depression, more than 3 more times likely to use drugs or have unprotected sex. In another study, she found that family acceptance helps protect adolescents against suicidal behavior, depression, substance abuse. Young people with accepting families also reported higher self-esteem, social support, and overall health. And I've put an attachment, a link at the bottom there if you do want to check out the full study. But essentially, that idea of, if you get kicked out of your home, you might go, live in a homeless center, live in the streets, go couch surf, and then you might then end up going out to parties to try and stay somewhere safe or warmth, or even get some food or drink in you. Again, people will hang around with who they feel accepted by, and they will stay in environments where they feel welcome. And even if it's not safe, if they feel safe, they'll stay there. So if you create the environment, then that person will likely come and stay with you. Again, it's friendship at the end of the day. No matter if you're at work, you're at home, or even strangers, having a friendly attitude makes a massive difference and weight off someone's back, because I end up going for drinks with my colleagues after work most nights because we sit down and we enjoy each other's company. And these are people I work with. I can just lock up and go home, just not see them. But because I choose to spend my time with them, then I understand their lives better to the point where they'll tell me stuff or have genuine conversations. And if we have problems, we can help each other out. And this is, again, so important with acceptance, that you accept someone for who they are, you genuinely make their lives better because you don't feel like, because a lot of people, again, there are times where people just aren't accepting or will try and tell you off, even if you're not doing anything wrong, or you've got some, like, I work with one person who's probably got some strange habits. Again, we're not completely sure if he's disabled or not, or if he's slightly autistic, or if that's just the way he is. But I still accept that colleague. I'm still nice to them. I'm still happy to them, and I work well with them. Which I know some of the other colleagues don't like him, which is a massive shame. Because it's just work. Like when you're working with people, you kind of have to work. I probably say work to people's advantages. Get people to do what they're good at, and that way you'll feel like you've absolutely smashed out your job today. So bringing this back to the LGBT community, a lot of people just generally, not everyone has a bad home life, but it is a common issue of, you'll find that they've had, most LGBT people will have at least one story where someone was homophobic to them. So, if you're accepting of them, where they feel like they can be themselves, then you're basically letting them be themselves. Their quirkiness, their habits, even just talking about their lives. Listening to people's stories about, I went out with my boyfriend, we had a lovely date, stuff like that. Because whether you're friends with someone or you're working with them, you play a role in that person's life, and they'll remember you. So as a Jedi, try your best to make the environment around you more positive, accepting, warmth. Positive, warmth, positive, sorry, can't think there. Positive, warmth, accepting environment. And again, build that positive relationships with people. Now, you don't have to be friends with every single person, but just be nice. There will be times where some people are hard, but as Satana said earlier, be patient. If they're still not getting it, then find a way to fix it, and sometimes just you just do have to walk away, which is hard, but if you try your best and you give it your all, that's all you can do. But as I said, I've learning things like more inclusive language, educating yourself, and just being accepting of people, their fashion, their quirks, their life choices, and just being nice to each other makes a difference. I hope this gives you folks almost a better basic understanding, but I do encourage you to do your own research, and again, with your LGBT friends, speak to them, maybe even go pride with them, go to a few gay bars with them. Honestly, you'll learn so much that way. And just, I went out last night and I had to explain to 3 people, non-binary, I've had to explain to 3 people last night how the whole non-binary thing works. And they were really nice about it, and they were really friendly. And I really enjoyed it because I ended up staying on someone's sofa last night because they accepted me for who I was and made me feel safe. I was at town last night where I had no way home. till the next morning because of the train I was catching back. I agreed to stay out with drinks with my colleagues, and because they were really friendly people, again, I managed to, one went back to the hotel with me, and I'm sleeping on the couch, and we're just friends, and it's nice. I mean, obviously, do take precautions, be safe. Don't go into any dangerous situation, and if you do think you're in a risky situation, then plan your
Trust your
best.
instincts and the Force.
Yeah, trusting and your force. But just be sensible. I don't want to say this, but use common sense. I mean, the Force will generally, if you listen to the Force, you'll generally find people that you'll gel with, and you'll get along with, and you'll I feel that connection to people through the Force. I know, I feel like I can trust them, and yeah, no. So yeah, next slide. Cool. So we'll have a little discussion and then answer some questions, and then we'll wrap this up.
So you mentioned resources that people could look into. I'm curious if you have any that you would recommend specifically.
I mean, we want to say Stonewall. I'm pretty sure Stonewall's an LGBT charity. I want to say Stonewall. I would say that if you went on to things like, I can't say things, do a Google search with LGBT communities. Again, it's probably very different. So because I'm from Cardiff, we have a lot of, Cardiff's a very diverse city, so we get a lot of, there was a massive LGBT, it's LGBT Wales is probably the big one for us down here. That's a massive resource from the UK. Actually, that's probably one of the better ones in the UK. If you just look into Google on Facebook, LGBT Wales, that'll pop up, and that'll help signpost you. But again, I know some of the people in this class, one person's from Italy, and then you both are, you're in the States, so kind of look at local posts. Again, I follow a lot of, there's a lot of pages on Facebook that you can follow. I think one was the Trans Army, as a transgender people posting stuff constantly about what's accepting, what's not accepting, and just generally things people would like to do in their life or how they want to be treated. I can't recommend any specific ones apart from the Welsh LGBT Wales, but just have a look on Google in your local area, stuff like that. Then hopefully that signposts you. BBC Social as well also have some really great videos, which I think I think that's everything I can recommend. Or just do YouTube searches if you're really lost or just don't know where to go. So start from the basic and go from there, if that makes sense.
It is Stonewall, yes. Stonewall is .org.uk is their website.
Perfect.
Yeah. No, I really like that, and I think it's very good point. I think about if you want to be a good ally, you've got to be willing to do some work yourself. I think yes, it's important to let people in the community lead for conversation, but at the end of the day, they are total human beings. So you should have varied and diverse conversations with people, and you shouldn't make your friends feel as though they're just a Q&A. People, it's just to be your friend, not your teacher and things. It's the power of Google and search engines and self-education is very important. Yeah, so that's a good point. really enjoyed that point because I think sometimes it's forgotten. So yeah, you can do your own work and educate yourself.
So what about in the sense of some people have a theological predisposition to believe, some people, Christianity. Well, I'll just throw it out there. Christianity has a predisposition in an abundance to be against the LGBT community. And we find that there are a lot of Jedi in the community who also cross-section with the Christian church. So for anyone who doesn't know, Keith Williams works in psychology. And so I'm putting this out to both of you, one of you actually being a member of the LGBT community and the other one being in psychology. So how would you guys speak to someone who has this conflict between their Jedi beliefs that they have to be tolerant and accepting and moving more towards acceptance than tolerance, because tolerance is really just that struggle that you have to deal with even when you don't agree, but it's the first step that you take until you can get to acceptance, which is why acceptance is not put in there in the compass, and it's tolerance instead, because it is the first step to get you there. So we recognize that is it's a journey to get to acceptance, and this is an acknowledgement of that. So how would you guys talk to someone in that position where their theological views, and it's not just Christianity, it's just Christianity is the big one, especially in our two cultures. How would you talk to them and tell them, hey, you know, this is the Jedi path. The Jedi path does this, and you're going to have to set aside whatever it is that you believe your deity believes, or your theology is trying to tell you you have to walk this line, because they can listen to all the arguments in the world, in which case there is a good book. It's called Walking the Bridgeless Canyon that gives you a good counter. It's by Kathy Baldick. Yeah, Baldick. But they might not be influenced by that. They might still say, no, that's not what the Bible says. So how would you discuss this with them? Sorry, I laid that one heavy.
Well, generally speaking, when it comes to religiosity, generally speaking, what one is looking for when discussing for someone whose faith or theology is a barrier in their life, is leading to maladaptive behaviors because of certain beliefs, you start deconstructing those beliefs. So I generally wouldn't talk to someone about the theology, because I think, one, I'm not an expert in theology, it's not my domain, but I think you appeal to human nature in such a situation, and I think you have to talk to someone and go, do you think it makes rational sense? It's reconciliation, I think, of, we know that homosexuality and intergender it does have genetic markers. We know it's incidental. People do not choose these things. So unless one is a Calvinist or a strong Lutheran who believes in predestination and that God has decided since time began that there's only 180,000 people who will inevitably prove themselves worthy, the elect, I think you can appeal, I think, to rationale there, which is that these people don't make this choice. It is not a choice. And so is it right for you to discriminate, hate, and deny these people their ability to be a total human being and experience love? Because it's incidental. It's not a choice. And I think, especially if someone comes from a religious background and is becoming a Jedi, I think you then do have to challenge and put to them this choice they have to make. And I think you can help them in that conversation with their beliefs and talking to them. But I don't think you can, generally speaking, I don't think you will ever reconcile a theology which is fundamentally God says X, Y, and Z. That is what I am supposed to believe, and I will not believe otherwise. Because that's a bigger challenge. So, for example, it's very difficult, for example, to reconcile evolution and a lot of Jesus's professed words in the gospel regarding his undoing of original sin and his confirming God's promise. Well, if evolution is true, there was no Adam and Eve, and thus there was no original sin. So what is Jesus talking about? So yeah, it's very difficult, I think, to reckon. So you have to, in my opinion, you have to appeal to human nature and empathy and kindness, and whether just slowly have that conversation and bring that person to that realization of
That they have to choose
responsibility.
between which
Yeah.
is more important to them.
Yeah, ultimately, whether positive regard for other human beings is more important than theology.
Oh, I was going to say whether the Jedi path is more important to them than their theology, but we can go with that too.
Yeah.
Yes, I will
Sorry.
absolutely ask you that question.
Yeah.
And that's me as a Christian.
Yeah.
What about your thoughts there, Ahsoka?
It's not really bad. Depends how I feel. Like, I've read the Bible, I've read the Quran, I've read a lot of I've got a book on Buddhist scriptures and Hinduism. Not I guess Hinduism. Depends how well I know them as well. I mean, if I feel like if I don't really know them, or we're just passing by, then I might just throw the line out of the Bible and be like, "Well, Jesus was accepting. This is what Jesus said." Again, I'll just whatever faith they come from. I'll have something in the back of my head. I think that sounds very bad. If I was to really get into it, it's talking to people. It's like I like to say, when you meet someone for the first time, it's a bit like dancing.
You're
You don't really know
froze.
what you're doing, but
Can you say that again? You froze.
sorry. So when you meet someone for the first time, it's a bit like a dance, because you don't want to step on each other's feet. You don't want to nudge each other. But if you get on well, then you'll start.
You're breaking up really bad.
And it's finding stuff that's moved. The Wi-Fi is absolutely horrendous in my class. Okay, can you that's it now?
Try one more time.
Oh, it's still freezing.
There we go.
So I'll start again. So basically I know I have read a lot of actually I can show you my bookshelf now. So this is a bookshelf. So there's a Bible, there's a Quran, there's some Buddhist books, there's some Hinduism, there's a book on Hinduism, there's Tao, there's paganism, stuff like that. So if I speak to people from different faiths about these subjects, as I was saying, I find talking to people is a bit like a dance. You don't want to stand on each other's feet. You don't want to nudge each other. But, you gotta try and find a rhythm to speak to someone. And if you start getting on well, you find your rhythm, you get kind of better. And then examples out of books, if I was using the Bible, I can say Jesus was actually quite accepting. He told you to love thy neighbors, stuff like that. And that. Again, I feel like it's trying to find something that's relatable in people's lives, because if you can relate somehow, almost build that connection of empathy with each other, then you'll start getting a better understanding of where their thought process comes from. And if you can get a good understanding of someone's thought process, then you get a better idea of how you can almost build your case and, again, explain the importance of these things. Because, no one wants, I say no one wants, there are some horrible people out there, but 8 times out of 10 people just generally want to be nice and don't want to be horrible to each other. So it's about finding that common ground with someone and then relating it to them so that they can see the bigger picture, helping them see the bigger picture. And again, if you find, so like, again, because it is related to our faiths, if you find something that from their religion that states something that would almost help them understand, because again, with most religious books I have read, I mean, there is a few things in the Old Testament, but if you read the New Testament, it's generally more accepting and stuff like that. Again, like I know in the Quran there's a couple of pages that talks about treating other people nice, kindness, stuff like that. So no, it is basically finding that relatable path for someone and then discussing it. And then if you actually genuinely care about someone, or if they are your friend, then you are more likely to invest more time into it and actually discuss it properly. But again, it's so hard because there are people on the internet. You can go on Facebook and give some advice, and you don't know if that person will listen or not. You can give it. It's similar to a friend. You can give your friend or your work colleague advice, and you don't know if they'll take it. So it's pretty much, for me, it's more about time and place. Know when to speak and know when to just I'll still call people out, but but if we're having those kinds of conversations, it's probably unlikely unless I am friends with them and like good friends with them, because that way I feel like I can make that difference. I might give the advice to people who I'm just casually friends with, but I won't invest the time. I probably won't invest the time properly unless I get really on with them.
Okay.
No, the next class will be Duty to All.